Balloon, and you're at Kids Entertainer Fest, and this is our late night interview segment. And tonight I'm really excited because my new Facebook friend, Amber Hollinger, is here. She is a storyboard artist and has worked on, I know the demographic that's attending this conference, and you have been a part of so many of their childhoods. And as somebody who never stopped watching cartoons, you're a part of my extended childhood, because so many cartoon shows that I love and movies and things are projects that you've worked on.
That's so kind. Thank you, Buster. I'm so happy to be here.
We're thrilled to have you. And the reason, in case anybody's wondering, the reason why I invited Amber to do this is because for me, I find a lot of times it's hard to, because most of what I do in my shows, I love cartoons and I do a lot of the gags and things I do based on that cartoon sensibility that's just been burned into my mind over the years. So a lot of times, instead of trying to write out a gag, it's easier for me to just do sketches. Even just like quick, stick people to kind of sketch out the key points of a gag. And I thought that would be a great thing to discuss with you, is how you block out the gags, especially in a comedy show. Something like the Flintstones or projects like that. Like, where do you put those comedy beats and decide like what's the key thing for the animators to hone in on? So I thought this would be a fun conversation.
Well, I certainly hope so. I was thinking about how to best talk about my experience as a storyboard artist and now a television director, how what I do in film will translate to all forms of children entertainers. And I have schemed up a little something if you'd like to see.
Yes, please.
All right. Well, first, I'll lead you into it. What I am going to use for my visual aid is the montage sequence from Mulan. So Disney's animated Mulan, directed by Barry Cook and Tony Bancroft. And I don't know if it was Dean DuBois or Chris Sanders who boarded the montage sequence, or if it was a hybrid of all of these gentlemen, but it is absolutely brilliant. And it's kind of a really nice backdrop to talk about visual storytelling that translates into all art forms. So what we're going to do first is, if you haven't seen this, shame on you.
Right.
You have to see it right now. But it is, for me, it is the perfect example of a montage sequence, which is that it informs the story and moves it forward. So we're going to watch the clip first, and then we're going to go down back through and break it down into key parts of storytelling, which all storytelling has a beginning, middle, and end. And Buster, you and I had a personal conversation. All entertainers are storytellers.
Yes.
Period. Anything that you do artistically to emote has a beginning, a middle, and an end. An illusion for your magic show does, a piece of music does, even a stagnant piece of art that you find hanging in a gallery, a really good one, tells a story. It kind of has a beginning, middle, and end visually, and then also leaves question marks for your own interpretation and excitement, which is kind of cool.
Well, and I think where a lot of people get lost on storytelling is they think that storytelling as an artist means you're recounting something that already happened. But a lot of times, like as a kids entertainer, I'm storytelling in real time. They're experiencing the story in real time with me. I'm not telling it past tense. They're living that thing that's already been written out in my head. So yeah, I love the analogy. Like everything is a story. Every joke, every gag, everything's a story. So this is perfect.
So the lead-in for this is that at this point in the film, again, if you haven't seen it, see it, but at this point in the film, Captain Lee has come to the realization that all these recruits, and if you're not aware, it's kind of like any other wartime story where inexperienced civilians have been called in to fight in the war, and there's all these poor, inexperienced young men in the army, and he's realizing, oh my gosh, we're never going to make it. We're going to get destroyed. I need to whip these guys into shape. And at this point, there has been an expectation set. He is going to show them, I am your model soldier. You need to be as good as me to fight in this army if we're going to win. And then he takes an arrow and he shoots it up to the top of this pole. And he basically says the kind of soldier that we need, the skill set that we need, is going to be able to get to the top of that pole, to shimmy up there somehow and grab that arrow. That's what I'm looking for. And of course, nobody can do it. And at that point, we kind of start this montage sequence. So I'm going to do this. Going to set this clip up for you. And I'm going to share my screen. I could watch that like a million times.
It is so good. That is such phenomenal storytelling.
I get chills every time I see that thing. It's just absolutely amazing. And now, let me just set up on my desktop. I'm going to walk us through why it was so gosh darn brilliant. Because that's what it is all about. I want to break it down portion by portion and then explain what it was in the storytelling that was happening so crucially that we saw the visuals that happened with it, because this was such a concise bit of storytelling here.
Yeah, I think we all know that the montage is a powerful storytelling tool. If the 80s taught us nothing else, we love the word montage as an amazing way to tell the story.
It is.
But I don't think people realize why it's important, so I love that you're walking us through this.
When used properly, it's an amazing tool. I think a lot of people don't maximize its use in the way that they really, really could. Okay, so for me, this is just like a near perfect way of storytelling. And now all of you out there, children's entertainers, great storytelling techniques can be used in any format, regardless of what your format. So we're gonna make a storyteller out of you. How do you like that, Keysball?
We might name this segment that. That might be the name of the segment.
So as we discussed, Captain Lee sees what a disastrous shape that his crew is in, and we are setting the tone. First thing we're doing is setting an expectation. So the tone is that we are in a little bit of dire straits. This is our goal. Great. We have to establish the players. We have to establish what's going on in our story as far as whose perspective are we seeing our story from. If you're an entertainer, like you, it's going to be your perspective. You're the illusionist, whatever experience you are having. In this, obviously, this is Mulan's perspective. And in this point in the story, the stakes could not be higher for Mulan. If she gets found out that she has tried to take her father's place in the army, she will likely be killed. Her family might be killed, and there's certainly their name will be disgraced, which is being dishonored in that culture is almost worse than being dead. So the stakes could not be higher, and they've already set that up. I also like to talk about the color story during this montage sequence, where they're starting out kind of muted, kind of neutral. This isn't like day or night, it almost feels like in between, but we are starting out with a little bit of hope. We're establishing that even though we have just seen that everybody has failed at the same task, Mulan is still ostracized. She's on the outside and getting picked on, so she's not part of this group, and that's really important in this journey. This is the first scene that we see. We're establishing relationships and her status amongst the group visually. They would literally knock her down on the ground, and you're gonna notice during the entire time before she retrieves the arrow, she's going to be visually lower in the screen than everybody else, because they're literally saying, you are beneath us, you are small, you are insignificant. So here is what we are aspiring to. Shirtless, in shape, badass. This is what we want you to be. Clearly this is what you are. You're not there yet. So to single her out visually, I love this. they're always going to find a way visually to separate her from the pack. That's really important. She's separate from everybody else. They're going to just keep hammering this through, that she's getting picked on. Consistency of she is beneath him in the frame. She is still aspiring to get higher in rank and respect. She's still beneath everybody. Ugh, it's just heartbreaking. And again, even though everyone else is failing, we're only focusing really on Mulan's failures. By this point, when nobody is having success, our color story has changed. We went from the hopeful yellow color to now these muted kind of gray, blue, purpley, depressing colors. Visually again, beneath everybody in the frame, they're still picking on her. They're reminding you now, halfway through, boy, now it's really deeply blue and saturated. They've lost hope, and the goal has not been attained. So you can even see it highlighted in a ring of white. Like, we have failed. We still have not achieved our goal. But you will notice that Captain Lee, is now almost parallel with that arrow, because they mean the same thing. They're both still the top of the pack that everybody's aspiring to be. That's really important.
Well, and by putting him up on that rock, you got him so much higher above her, showing like just how far they've got to go. He's so high above.
That's right. See that visual? That's great. Buster is right. It's visual distance. So without saying a word, which is why the music is great and catchy. And thank you, Donny Osmond, for rocking this out. But but you can see how one image, if you saw this hanging in an art gallery and you had never seen Mulan, you would understand a lot of what was going on here. You would at least understand tonally what was happening, but you'd understand a lot more. You're being inferred a lot of information by these very, very thoughtful staging setups.
Definitely.
So there's still, now that day is breaking, they're trying to get a little bit of hope back, right? Because yellow signifies hope, and blue and gray signify despair and failure. So most of the other people are now stronger than her and succeeding. And again, she is small and behind and lower than everybody else in the frame. And here, when she falls down, it's literally her lowest point emotionally in the scene. She has just realized that she cannot keep up and she's failing. She's literally face first in the dirt on the ground. He's literally looking down on her. I mean, so powerful. And like, this is it. Like, if she gets kicked out, she might get found out. It is just, she can't get any lower. She's literally lowering her head into the dirt. That's how she feels. And she feels left behind. I mean, it's just so beautiful. She's literally being left behind. And that's how she feels emotionally. God damn, it's good.
And again, that picture right there, if you just saw that hanging in a gallery, just that frame, you know the exact story of that scene without knowing anything else about the story happening around it, the movie.
Exactly.
So good.
So then, literally the darkest hour, we're back to our color story, attaching meaning to a color. We're back to those really muted, but still like darkly saturated blues, grays, purples, because it's her darkest hour. And he's still looking down on her, literally, and he basically is telling her at this point in the montage, right? He's telling her, you're done, pack up, go home, you're through. And she's devastated, obviously. Okay, brilliant. She's walking past the pole off screen. She is literally in the shadow of all these other people, of her father, of everybody else, of anything that she needs to do. She has just been overshadowed completely by defeat. We're going to reestablish what the goal is. The failure is looming over her. Look how small she is in the frame. So just as an example, if you had shot this from Mulan's perspective, like from the ground looking up, Mulan would have seemed big in the frame and the arrow would have seemed small. You still would have seen the distance that she needed to go to achieve, But this choice is so much more powerful because she is literally being like framed and swallowed up by this insurmountable task. It's so visually beautiful to me. So we don't even see that she has to think about anything. The next cut is that she's putting those weights on. She's just not going to give up. And everything is still dark and gloomy. She's not strong enough. Maybe she can be smart enough. So she is going to try, like she figures out over everybody else that she can use these, when wrapped around, she can use it like a lumberjack, like a pulley when you see lumberjacks hiking up huge trees to saw them up. She's gaining momentum. As soon as she kind of figures out the key, already the color story starts to change. It starts to lighten up. Do you see the yellow popping through the bottom? Yellow is hope. She's literally rising above her fears now. Now, do we stay on Mulan? No, because we set up an expectation that she was ostracized from the group. She wants everybody's respect. So now that we know that she's not going to give up, the most important thing we need to know is that other people are going to watch her succeed because she needs their respect and approval. This team, this army has to work as a team if they're going to succeed. But already take a look. Gosh, I mean, it's just so freaking good, it kills me. The screen is split diagonally in half. Yellow glowing with hope above. Still, and I even like to call this this purple or blue color, maybe even fear or ignorance or failure. But I believe ignorance is also prejudice, maybe tied into this. Certainly sexism, although they don't know that she's a girl yet. But these people, look, he's still shrouded in ignorance. But he's also visually, what's he doing? He's actually looking up at her for the first time. And here she is, climbing her way. Yellow is seeping its way into the scene. We're there, so now, look what we're seeing. She's closer to this looming goal. It's surrounded in that hope of yellow. She's still in darkness over here. Everybody else is still in ignorance and failure and dark, but she is now bigger and above them in the scene. And now, from this point forward, you'll never see her below them in the scene again. She's always going to be staged higher and more powerful. Come on. I mean, she literally grabs herself up out of the darkness into the light, into success. She really just literally lifts herself into the glow of hope. Come on.
I had goosebumps when you changed that slide. Wait.
I mean, come on. It's so powerful. It's so beautiful. And there were so many choices made for that to be so impactful without saying a word. Like, your audience at home, and filmmakers know this, your audience at home doesn't know about color story and color theme in a movie. That's our job. But if we do it effectively, our audience feels what we want them to feel. And there's nobody that watches this montage sequence, whether you like animation or not, that doesn't feel the way that these directors intended for you to feel. It's inescapable. It's done too well. Everybody now, not just one guy, everybody's looking up to her. Oh, now this is the best. I'm going to talk in a minute after I shut down this little presentation. I'm going to talk about how this is all tied into other forms of entertainment. But here, this is super, super important. There's so many choices to be made, and choices are going to be a big part of my next discussion. We could watch Mulan reach the top and grab the arrow. That's what the scene's about, her success, right? No, not at this point in the montage. What's the most important is, what did we set up at the very beginning? He is the person to win over. he is the person that all the expectations have been built up. You have to be as good as him. So we don't need to see, we know Mulan's going to succeed. She's up there, everybody's looking up to her. She's rising into the, the golden sun hour. What's most important for our audience to know now is his reaction. And so we don't see Mulan get that arrow. What we see is Captain Lee walking out of the tent and this arrow defiantly ejecting down into the scene in front of him. Let's just talk about this composition. Here's the darkness around him. He literally walked out of the darkness. He is circled in light. I would like to call this the circle of enlightenment, literally. He's enlightened. He now sees Mulan for the possibility of who she could be as a soldier. He finally sees worth. And then also this arrow, represents Mulan. It's bigger than him. This represents something so much bigger than Captain Lee now. God damn it. Amazing. Oh, and guess what?
I agree 1,000%.
But guess where Mulan is now? She's on the top of the ring, higher than everybody, because she has elevated her status. She has now, visually, without a word being spoken, she has earned everybody's respect. She is going to be accepted now. Everybody has embraced, and they're cheering her on. He is looking up to her. He sees her, wait for it, in a completely different light now. Literally. Yellow abounds. Yellow rising up and eating up that gray and blue. Amazing. Yeah, she's satisfied. You should be, Mulan. You go, girl. So, and then you'll see rest of the sequence. Where is she? She's now better than everybody. She's leading the pack. She's higher in the frame. Look at these joyful, saturated, beautiful, happy, hopeful colors. Because
they put them on like a flat plane. They put them on a hill so that she's got the higher
choices.
ground.
Always going to be choices in storytelling. And then we've got our beautiful color story of hope and victory and success. But we still need to drive home that she's better than him. We have to switch the power dynamic in this story and make sure that we get one more literal knock on Captain Lee. Take that, take a foot to the face. She knocks him down, just like he did in the very beginning of the montage sequence. She has bested him. He has to look up to her once again, but it wasn't just through that task. And some people might argue that there are a lot of repetitive beats in this montage sequence. And I would disagree, because one, you have to fill up the beautiful song. But two, each little bit of what would be considered a repetitive beat ups the stake and still informs the story. So it was one thing for Mulan to grab that arrow and complete his task. It was a different thing for her to actually best him in hand-to-hand combat, even if it was just for a moment. That's a very personal thing that had to happen, in my opinion, as a storyteller. And then because of her choices, everybody is succeeding. So no one could succeed before she kind of broke that mold. So it really, and without saying a word, now what they are suggesting is that Mulan is the real leader and not Captain Lee, because it was only after her actions did everybody start to succeed and follow her. However, you will notice we're almost at the end of the montage sequence, and our color story is changing to red. And that is because we are ending, again, you haven't seen the film, what happens right after this is a huge battle with the Huns. And there's a lot of dead people after this. Like, it goes to a very, you realize why they had to be so good in battle, because the Huns are a horrific kind of enemy for them, and they need to be that good because they will lose, they will die. So what we're doing here is red is going to signify battles in this movie. So they're slowly shifting us from, the purple and yellow, but literally look at this split screen almost. They're exiting the hope and the darkness and moving into red because we're going to move into a battle scene. This is nice moment. Everybody's friends and accepted. You know they're going to move into the battle working together, which is important. And then the very last scene, still she's above everybody and the focal point, but very much now she's in sync with everybody. She's part of the team. Remember that very first few shots where she was, you know, knocking everybody down and she was not in sync visually with everybody else. She visually now, you are recognizing she's in sync with the team, they're in sync with her. Visually very powerful, but also now we are going to go get our asses kicked in war. But it's a beautiful choice to end it before you even know. Like, you're going to end this feeling pretty happy because she succeeded. But even so, because of that choice to change the color story to take us in to the next sequence in the film, you know there's something wrong. Just instinctively, you like, wait, something's not right. Red is usually fire, danger, sometimes passion, maybe all of the above, but brilliant choices. These were all, just like in live action filmmaking, in music, in illusions, these are all very decided choices, thoughtful choices, and you could make so many different ones. I just thought this was a great example of choices well made for the story that you're telling.
It really is. And I just want to, for our viewers at home, I will point out that, like, even though this wasn't your project, none of these choices are like they did it and then backtracked and said, oh yeah, we did that and that worked. These were conscious decisions made going into production. These were details thought out in advance. Because I've talked to a lot of magicians and other performers who think things like color don't matter or music doesn't matter. They can just put on any music, or the color of their costume doesn't matter and the color of their backdrop doesn't matter. And every one of those choices has an impact on the audience emotionally and mentally, and how they're going to connect to you. And like with this, I love what you were saying about how they're shifting to the red, because as a storytelling choice, they could have jumped to the red, which would have been a shock, you know, and sometimes that's the way you want to do it. Like in a horror film, you might want to jump from happy to shock. But with this, they're kind of giving you the heads up that, you know, that was warm and fuzzy and inspiring, but we're moving into the reason she had to learn this now. And I love that transition.
And you know, and it may have been just effective to jump to a shocking red battle in the next scene. This was just a choice. So sometimes there are parallel choices that aren't good, bad, right, or wrong. Sometimes if you looked at two things side by side, it becomes very obvious that one choice elevated the storytelling and your communication to your audience, and the other one was maybe not as effective. You see my little logo in the background. That's one of the reasons I started this podcast called Film Fight, because how many times have you seen a movie that seems just like another movie, except the one you saw was either so much better or so much worse? And you're wondering, well, these movies were almost identical. Why is one better than the other? And but it's all about choices, and I love that discussion. And that is what, basically what I want to talk about as far as, I'm going to get my other little notes. For all of you other children's entertainers, so Buster, tell me who, besides magicians, what other kind of children's entertainers frequent, who is our audience? And
well, I think at this point we have about 50-50. Most of our audience is magicians and clowns. And then in addition to that, we've got a whole bunch of Santas. That kind of surprised me. I'm excited that they're coming, because I love them into the storytelling and the performance aspect of what they do. But yeah, we got a bunch of Santas. We've got some jugglers. We've got like party princesses and mermaids who people go out in costume to parties. So really, we're all over the place. Just not anything that happens as far as like kids entertainment. Anything that you might book for a kid's birthday party is represented somewhere in this group.
Okay, well that is perfect, because that is what I have tailored my little chat about. So next year I'm drinking my tea so I don't get parched. So children's entertainment is entertainment, period. It's follows the same basic rules as any other form of entertainment, right down to targeting the audience that you want to reach and the best format that suits that. Excuse me. And as we kind of just discussed when all that Mulan stuff, is that entertaining to me is all about storytelling, whether it's film or art or live theater, music, magic, whatever it is. All of these things, sometimes a lot of them are used in combination with each other to effectively tell your story. But I'm going to use Buster as my example because I've just found it to be more relevant. So he's an illusionist, he's a magician. Magicians often use sound effects or music in their shows to kind of coax their audience in the direction that they, or the headspace that they want them to be. And so we talked about all the different choices you need to make. We talked about building an expectation for your audience, like in Mulan. We talked about setting the scene, talked about setting the tone, we talked about beginning, middle, and end. So what would that mean for someone like Buster? Well, I'd like to think of all storytelling as being built on the foundation of problem solving and choices. So I've made up an imaginary problem scenario for Buster in one of his illusion shows.
This was not rehearsed, by the way. I did not know this was coming, so this will be fun. All right.
And if you may steal this if you would like. I don't know how you would do that, but you can totally steal it if you want. But let's say for a part of Buster's magic show or illusion that he wants to or needs to walk through a freestanding door that he has set up on stage. So, one of those just framed out doors, like on a set of a play that you would walk through, and the door is closed, but he goes up to open the door, and he can't get through, he can't open it. Now, the door is locked. It's a freestanding door. So couldn't Buster just walk around the door? There's already comedy there, visually already set up. So this is where you're establishing your expectations for the audience and also the rules, right? So if this is a freestanding door and Buster can't walk around it, he has to make some choices about how does he display that he can't just walk around the door, or does he not address it at all? Those are choices. So if he never attempts to walk around the door, people are going to wonder the whole time, why didn't he try to do that? That could be part of the joke. Choices to be made. So, but there are other choices to be made. So can he not get through the door because he's not smart? Is he playing kind of like a dum-dum? Is there a force field that's preventing him from getting around? So maybe when he tries to walk through around the door, he visually smashes into an invisible force field, which is great for physical comedy with kids, but also it just represents the logic of, or dislogic of, I can't get around the door. So what's preventing him and what his attempts that he goes through, we just have to show that he can't get through the door, right? So now your expectation is that at some point during the show, Buster's going to get through that door, right? How's he going to figure it out? So that's your beginning of your story. Now you have to figure out, you've set up some choices there, you have to figure out how will you do that? How does Buster get through the door if that's what his gag is going to be? And his attempts and failures are the middle of the story, and there's so many choices to be made there. And just like in a film, the pace should build from kind of a slower confusion to faster and bigger actions and emotions and ludicrous gags. Does he try to use a battering ram on the door to blow it up, or like an actual bomb to blow it up? And maybe there's some gag, maybe he has a partner in the scene and he's batter ramming, he can't get it to open, and then somebody, while he's panting and I can't do it, like another person just walks up, opens the door, and walks right through. That's always funny. Wait, why is it personal now? Is there something personal with the door? Why did this other person just get to walk right through? Again, those are choices to be made. Is this door just stuck shut, or is this personal something that Thor has against Buster.
It's personal. Personal.
So Buster's going to continue with his gag. He's going to continue until he hits a height of action and emotion, and that would be, you know, in filmatic terms, that would be the climax of this bit. So just like in a film, whatever that climax is, it should bring us as the audience to a satisfying resolution. And as I say that out loud, I know it sounds super, super sexual, but I swear it's totally legit. And I don't know, maybe something you should just apply in your own life. But as he goes through deciding what that climb of action is until he's basically milked everything he's going to get out of this bit, and it has to resolve. There has to be some kind of resolution, which would be the ending of this bit. He has choices he needs to make for his resolution. After all of his trials and failures, how does he want this to end? So also, in doing so, is he going to satisfy the expectation that's being set up at the beginning? Is he successful? Does he get through the door? I don't know. Does the door win? Is that more satisfying? And it really depends on the choices that you make setting up. Is really going to greatly impact how your audience feels when whatever the outcome is, if that makes sense. So in Mulan, if we set up that arrow thing and never paid it off, like just went through the training sequence and no one ever got the arrow, your audience would be thinking about that arrow the whole time. That's not good storytelling. Why would you? It's in screenwriting, it's called Chekhov's gun. If you show a gun in the first act, it's gonna go off in the third act. You know, it's just how it has to be. So Buster has to make a lot of conscious decisions for this very, very compelling gag.
I watched an old Merry Melodies cartoon last night where the nanny gets into a car to make out with some guy. Because cartoons were really raunchy back then. They're not kids' cartoons. So she gets in a car to make out with this guy, and then something happens, and they drive off. And she leaves the carriage there on the sidewalk, and they never come back to it. She just leaves the baby in the stroller. And then they go off to something with birds, and the rest of it's all about the birds in the park. Where's the baby? What about the? He literally just a completely random, out of nowhere guy that was totally out of place, and they never went back to that.
Yeah, that's
and it has been bothering me for the last 13 hours. That has been bothering me.
That's awesome. Thank you. It's perfect story to illustrate my point. There's also some other choices that he could make here. Perhaps this door gag is a running gag throughout his show. Maybe he visits it at the beginning and he can't get through, and then forget about it, I'm going to try it later. He goes on with his other illusions and then periodically revisits the door throughout the show, and then at the very end resolves it, thus creating a bookend kind of thing like people often use in films. It's a choice. You never know. So other choices that can be made, like we talked about before when you were suggesting how important color and music and other outside elements to help your audience feel what you want them to feel. Like you're trying to emote something. So in your storytelling, you got to think about music. And do you have dialogue? Is your show, is it all pantomime? Does dialogue enhance it or take away from what you're doing? Do you have sound effects that you play? Do those enhance your performance or take away from it? There's usually no good, bad, right, or wrong per things, as long as you're effectively emoting what you want to your audience. So then you have to think about your music. Is your music going to be dramatic and scary or cutesy? It all will tell your audience kind of what you're setting up. Maybe it's a combination of both. Colors. Maybe you've got your lights on the stage or in your office if you're just recording things via Zoom during the pandemic. You can put different colored light bulbs or filters on things. So just like Mulan, you can attach a color story. If you want something to feel happy and joyful, maybe you're cast in yellow and brightness and white light. And if you are feeling sad, maybe you cast yourself in blue lights. Your kids are like, oh, I'm so sad. Or red, I'm so angry. All those things can enhance a performance, especially if you're not using dialogue. And not every show involves lighting or sound effects or music, but something to think about. You can always add that into your show if you haven't previously. But these are all choices, and there's so many choices.
I love that, like you said, like the color. If this were in a theater setting where you've got lighting, the exact same piece, solo performer on stage trying to get through a door. If you make the lighting red, now it becomes angry. It could even be horror, a one-person horror of why can't I get through this door, versus changing that lighting to yellow, and now it's physical slapstick comedy versus blue, and now it's a very, oh, we feel sorry for the clown because he can't get through the door kind of thing. And I love that, each of these little, what most people might think of as insignificant choices are so powerful. And even
They really are.
what are the colors of the prop? If you're not doing a theater show, like I've got my giant crayon box and stuff back here, what are the colors and what's the design? Because I see oh my gosh, magic props are hideous things. Hideous. The store-bought ones, terrible. Bad stenciling. And so, yeah, when I look at what's going to the show, like, it really is. Like, does the style of this, if it's something cartoony, like my little dinosaur guy back here, is it an art style that matches something that would be in Buster's world? And yeah, I love these little details, and the music has to be the right, because you can't, unless it's for comedy effect, you can't really jump, like a big jump in genre. There's got to be a reason why you make a big jump in musical genre during your show. And again, that's a choice, but why did you make that choice? Is there a reason you did it, or did you just think that was a cool song at the time?
Yeah, your audience can usually tell if your choices are arbitrary. Just facts. So think about that. Don't feel, I would rather edit something out if I'm asking myself why I'm using it and I don't really have a clear answer that makes sense. Like if I was being questioned at a film festival, like, why did you make that choice? I have an answer for every shot of every film I've made or every television show I've made. Every one of my choices is absolutely purposeful, and it's made to enhance whatever story I'm telling at any given time. And Buster, you're talking about your props in the background. Well, that all has to do with your choices in staging. Most clowns and magicians and illusionists and performers in general, they're setting their stage behind them. So what does their stage look like when you're thinking about that in terms of that door gag? Well, where you put that door on stage in proximity to your person is going to impact how big of a presence it is. Like, is the door in a background? Is it an afterthought and you go and visit it every once in a while for the gag? Or is it right up against you, so it's literally like intruding on your space and you have to deal with this problem? There's no right or wrong answer except for the ultimate gag and resolution that you want to have and how you want your audience to feel. Is the door bigger than you, so it feels imposing? Is the door smaller than you, and somehow that's a problem? Are you going to have to stand up on boxes? Or there's so many choices to be made, but that's all part of your staging. And you would want to think about also, if you're like, let's say your door gag is the center of your show, well, then behind, you've got your foreground, your middle ground, and your background in theater or stage or magic or illusion or film or whatever, or art or whatever it is. Even music, right, with layers of instruments and sounds. Everything has a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. We're all the same piece of art, really. Don't clutter your space. If your main focus, kind of like in those shots we saw in Mulan, your eye went exactly where the director wanted you to look. What was the most important thing in the scene? You were looking at it the whole time. So don't have your back, your area cluttered. If your main focus is one area of the stage, then make sure that there isn't anything distracting behind you here. Have your other props kind of set off to the side. Maybe have them in shadow and have this in light. And then when you want those brought into focus, kind of like old, vaudeville, then spotlight here, spotlight there. But always have a clear idea in your head of what the audience is seeing, because your audience will know. You know what I mean? Like, what do you want them to see? You have to think about that first.
Well, I love what you said during the montage that there's all these decisions being made that the audience doesn't consciously become aware of. They put the, as a whole it works, but they don't pick out like, I love music and I love art. So like the color definitely stands out to me in those scenes, but without walking through it with you, I don't think I fully understood why the colors affected me the way they did. But they totally do. Everything you said was dead on accurate as to how I felt in those scenes, and I didn't know why. And like the music, I know it's a great song. It's on my favorite playlist. Love that song. And it's perfect, but why? Like, where are the beats, and how are the beats lining up with the scenes of it to make that totally work like that? And yeah, I think what you said before, if you do it right, I think that's maybe why performers don't pay attention to those little details sometimes, because they don't think the audience notices. And if you ask an audience, no one's going to name that. They're not going to say, you know, when the song hit that one beat, right, when you did that thing, that was perfect. They're not going to say that to you, but they'll feel it. If you get all those elements right, just like that beautiful montage, at the end of that, you totally feel what the artist wanted you to feel, and that's the goal. That's what we want.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You know, even there's that one point in the song stylistically where all the music dropped out and you just had, you know, a cappella, voices, be a man, you know, but even so that absence of music was a choice. And guess what? You had this big swelling music and all of a sudden you take that away. And for me, it felt a little bit tribal and chanty and unison, like you would, you know, in the army when they're doing their drills. 2, 3, 4. It gives like just that tiny little choice. You still kind of felt army, but all of a sudden it kind of woke you up a little bit. It's a little bit modern. So even like in your performances, the absence of sound. But you're right. Think about a movie that you've seen that you were like, I wanted to like that movie. Like it was so like I was almost there, but what was it? Sometimes an audience member can't pinpoint it, but you would be absolutely annoyed to watch a movie with me. I will pinpoint that. I'll pinpoint that motherfucker like nothing you've ever seen.
Totally get that. We need to watch movies together, because I would totally make you one of those moments. Because it's frustrating. You watch movies like, I want to like this movie, and there's something just off. There's just something that's not working here, and I don't know what it is. This should be a good movie, and that's really I think that's almost worse than watching a bad movie. Is watching a movie that could have been good, and you just feel like they just missed a few of those choices to make it what it should have been.
Yeah, so frustrating. But that was my little presentation. That's how I drew paralleled our two art forms together.
That is fantastic. And this is exactly why I wanted to talk to you about this, because like when I look at, especially a cartoon storyboard, if I look at, like, I saw some of your Flintstones ones and some of the other the cartoon show TV type ones you've done, and like I'm a big fan of Bob Camp, and looking at Bob Camp's old storyboards from the original Ren and Stimpy when he was running the show there, just the comedy beats, and seeing like, you know the animators had fun getting from point A to point B, but who chose point A to point B? Like, what were those 2 points, and what was the choice? Like, why is the character making this face specifically here? There's a great one where like Wilma walks into the room, says something to Fred, Fred's jaw drops, and then they're like little arching arrows of Wilma kind of flouncing out of the room after she dropped that bombshell on Fred. It's like, that's so perfect. It's just like I almost don't need anyone to draw the in-betweens. I know exactly what that story was.
Right, and in that scene, it was important for Fred to see how excited Wilma was about going away on vacation. She just bought this new like sexy fur dinosaur bikini or whatever it was, and she was showing him. And of course, Fred's going to find some way to mess up this vacation, and there's going to be a miscommunication and all that kind of good stuff that always happens in the Flintstones. But it was important for Fred to be equally excited as Wilma. So seeing his hot wife in a bikini and seeing how excited she was, you needed a little bit of build-up, so that when that doesn't happen, everybody is really disappointed. Fred now has the motivation to go fix things, because disappointing your wife, No bueno.
Poor choice, very poor choice. A lot of choices to be made. That's not one of them.
But for me, all those decisions are easier to make when you know what story you're telling. So in your illusion show, if you know the story that you want to tell, the choices you make are going to be easier if you always like. You've seen City Slickers, right? Okay, so the one thing, right? He has to think about it. Once he figured out what that one thing was, all of the other bullshit fell away. And sometimes it's easy in storytelling to get overwhelmed with choices because there are so many. But you can usually whittle it down and gain your focus when you start asking yourself questions. Well, what is my story? And if I make this choice, does that support the story I'm trying to tell? Does that support the emotion I'm trying to get across? If it doesn't do those two things, that's not the right choice. And you can kind of it's almost like a list of pros and cons. If you say, does it service the story or doesn't it? This is a lot of trial and error too. Like, you can't be lazy about it. You're gonna make wrong choices. You can't be afraid of making a mistake, and then you're gonna learn from that mistake because you're gonna see something. You're gonna see your show recorded and be like, oh, why did I do this in this sequence of events? It would have been much better if I had done that. So watch yourself. If you were brave enough, you could pull. Kids are, ferociously, hurtfully honest. And some little kids on the spot won't tell you, but you could always ask parents, ask your kids, ask some people in the audience, hey, what did you feel? How did you feel about that gag? Or what was your favorite part of the show? Or even better yet, was there something I did that you didn't understand? And kids are good when you ask direct questions. So if you're like, hey, did you like the show? They'd be like, yeah, of course we like the show. You know what I mean? They're not going to be like, that one point where I wasn't fine, but that handkerchief was up your sleeve. I just wasn't. They're not going to say that. But if you're self-conscious about a certain part of your performance or wondering if something reads, ask specifically. I pulled this thing out of my sleeve. Did you understand why I was doing that? Were you surprised by it? Was there something else I could have pulled out that would have been more surprising? And then give them ideas. What if I pulled out, a jackhammer, like you could? But, what if I pulled out that and see what their reaction would be?
Or why do you think I couldn't get through the door?
Yeah, but that's great. And again, even if you couldn't get through the door, as long as you set up in the beginning that the door wins, then if you can't get through the door, nobody's going to be disappointed. They're going to laugh and go, God, you never got through that door. And then maybe it's a running gag in all your shows. Like, there's just a door back there, whether you ever try to get through it or not, right? Maybe it's just there, and then that becomes like your signature thing. If you can't, or maybe it's a running gag through every show. Like, you do one gag per show, or you open and close every one of your magic shows, trying to get through the door and can't, and then the last thing you do is you try to get through the door, you can't, and you got to exit out the other way. And then it becomes a built-up expectation in your show that Buster can't get through the door. Great. Fantastic. And you're welcome out there. If anyone wants to steal that idea, it's genius. Do it.
Just send us your essay of why you could not get through the door.
Right?
We'll
Somebody blog me a blog post in a whole... Email Buster right now with all the reasons he couldn't get through the door.
I kept you on here for a full hour now, which is, I promised I wasn't going to keep you too much longer than that. So before you go, if you wouldn't mind delighting us, I know you've got Film Fight coming up, the podcast where you and other people who are crazy about movies discuss why one movie was better than the other. What are the first two you're doing? I forgot. Duel and...
So we just debuted this weekend. We're on all major platforms where you can find podcasts, Podbean, Stitcher, Google, Amazon, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Listen Notes, Player FM, Apple. We're just, anywhere you can find podcasts, we're there. We're talking about two movies conceptually from everything from the casting, the directing, the writing, the choices about set location, like all the choices that go into making a film, and how at the stage when you are, every movie starts with a period of production. right? None of these things happen by accident. Everything, you have a set list, you have a call list, everything is very regimented for the shots that you need to get. All of these things have to be decided well before you go and rent your location and hire your actors and all that kind of stuff. So what are the choices you can make during that time that are going to help you along later? So, and we see the choices when we compare two movies that are so similar, it's really easy then to see, wow, this one was so much more satisfying because they made these choices, whereas these people could have made these choices. So, and we're four friends talking about film, so it's pretty chill. Our very first episode is just me and my friend Zach, and Zach has some other podcasters, and he's a writer. And then my two buddies, Jim and Steve, join in, and Steve Vestano. I'm just marrying the two together now. Jim Vestano is like a marketing strategist for Team One Marketing. So he does ad campaigns for Pepsi and Lexus. So he has his finger on the pulse for what makes things sell and pleasing to an audience. And Steve Walter is an Emmy-nominated sound engineer and works on all of the great Netflix and Disney shows. That all that great sound that you hear is him. He does a lot of post-production work. So gotta really, and we're all just really good friends, really silly. So they join in the second episode, and now we've even started like filming ourselves watching the movie, and we're gonna start releasing little clips on TikTok and social media so you can actually see us watching these movies together. We're just a bunch of friends being silly, but it's all based in filmology. There's a lot of film language, there is actual dissection of these movies, and at the same time we're just fucking around being friends. So that's out now, yay, Film Fight! The first match is Duel versus Joyride, which is two like road rage thriller type of movies that are very similar. Our next one is going to be 48 Hours versus Red Heat. That's great because it was the same director 10 years apart trying to do a buddy cop film. So it's the buddy cop film genre. It's a great matchup. And then at the end of this month, May 31st, Housebroken. On the bottom. There we are, the stars.
I just saw a billboard for that the other day.
It's really exciting. Fox has totally backed this project. It's Lisa Kudrow stars in basically a story about pets in group therapy, and it's so great. I mean, all audiences love their pets, but it's so relatable to humans alike because everybody has interpersonal relationships. Everybody likes shows about examining those relationships and talking about it. And I'm sure most people like comedy. And our cast, I mean, besides Lisa Kudrow heading it up, we've got Tony Hale, hello, Jason Mantzoukas, Sam Richardson, Will Fort, Sharon Horgan, Nat Faxon, Clea Duvall. Clea Duvall was actually also one of the creators, along with Gabby Allen and Jen Crittenden. And then Mark Kirkland, if you don't know who that is, he is the longest running supervising director on The Simpsons. And he came over to be the supervising director on Housebroken. So that was great. I got to work with him, and he's a legend. He's just amazing. So that coming out at the end of the month, I could not be more thrilled to have directed that series or directed episodes on that series. And then out on Apple TV, Stillwater. And if you have those three people that have Apple TV love it, it's not as advertised as something like Housebroken, but it is just the most wonderful children's property there is for small children. But I mean, adults love it too. It's based on a set of children's books by John Muth, and it's all based in Zen philosophy and mindfulness. And the production quality is outstanding. We've already been nominated for a Peabody Award and an Annie Award, and to have directed, I think, 19 episodes that first season. I'm so thrilled that it's been, for the few people who've seen it, it's been received very, very well.
Well, I was going to ask, like, what for people who want to like follow through on the things that you talked about, like what are some of the animated properties you worked on, and really that's probably, there's your past work, of course. They can find that on IMDb and stuff, but really I think this is the perfect representation, because Stillwater and Housebroken,
and then my new series.
That's like the opposite ends of the spectrum. You have like the morning, like the tender preschool child thing, and then the Fox animation evening.
If you'll notice on my Zoom promo background, on this side of me, you will see the adult side, because Housebroken is an adult sitcom. It's prime time. And then Film Fight is definitely, we've got language in there and some adult content, so that's adult. And then on this side, you've got Stillwater, which is technically a preschool property, but great for all ages, don't mistake. And then my newest property, Hamster and Gretel, which is in production now. I'll be directing first season on Hamster and Gretel, and it will be seen on Disney Plus in the future. And for anybody who doesn't know the backstory on Hamster and Gretel, it is the brainchild of one Dan Povenmire, who happens to be the creator of Phineas and Ferb. And if you haven't heard of Phineas and Ferb, you are likely dead.
Can't help you.
You're definitely not frontline.
Just before you even go watch Mulan, go and binge watch all of Phineas and Ferb.
Oh, I mean, and Phineas and Ferb is one of those properties. And first of all, Dan's a genius. He's one of those. I don't even know if you can't call it like a double threat or a triple threat or a quadruple threat. Like he writes, like he's one of the head writers for Phineas for all of his projects. He draws, so he can board out his whole, like he boarded the pilot of Hamster and Gretel. I'm just helping to like pull the end strings of the pilot together and get off the ground, but he's pretty much done all the pilot, and he writes music, plays music, sings. He can be a board artist, he can be a director, can he produce, can he executive produce? He can. Is he a TikTok star? Yes. If he just goes, what is that, like an octothreat? I don't know, but I'm humbled to work with him.
We've lost count of the retreats at this point.
It's crazy. So to be able to work, part of the joy is to learn from all these great sources that I get to work with, and it's always, of course, so much fun. Like Hamster and Gretel is just a riot. It's so that same energy of Phineas and Ferb. If you like Phineas and Ferb, you're gonna love Hamster and Gretel. It's everything you want to see in a cartoon. It's fun.
I had not heard of Hamster. Just the name alone completely delighted me. And
look how cute. Oh look, and there's her brother. There's her brother Kevin. So it's so funny that I was covering Kevin the whole time, because the part of the premise is that Hamster and Gretel get bestowed these special powers by aliens, and Kevin her big brother doesn't get any powers, so he's always like off on the sidelines, like, oh, feeling a little left.
Always behind somebody's head.
Kevin.
Amber, you're awesome, and this has been so much fun. I had so much fun talking to you last time when we were discussing what we were going to do with this, and this was so much fun, and I'm so glad that we found each other on Facebook, because
this was great.
So cool.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having me speak to your audience, and I hope all of you out there took something away from it.
I don't even care about them at this point. I had a great time and I learned a bunch, so that's all that really matters to me. So for Kids Entertainer Fest, this is Buster Balloon and Amber Hollinger signing off. Thanks for playing with us, kids.